infrastructure is the backbone. It is the main artery that drives development and growth in any economy. And for us as Cement Zimbabwe, we are concerned, and we are a leading voice in advocating for policy and in advocating for any way forward to get infrastructure development happening in our economy. And today, I just want to borrow from the minister's speech. I was challenged when he said that when pressure is applied on you, and the pressures that we face today are enormous and across all indicators of the economy, you need to come up with new innovations. You need to transform your organization, and you need to think outside the box in order to come up with solutions or in order to come up with ways to remain competitive and to survive. And today I'm very proud to share with you two innovations that Lafarge Cement Zimbabwe has been actively involved in lobbying and also in practical involvement in order to bring the infrastructure segment to life again. The first one is on the roads technology. I'm sure you've all seen through our lobbying and our discussions on concrete roads. This really came up when, after the heavy rains that we experienced last year. And we realized that the state of our roads is in a condition that really requires intervention from organizations like ours. We therefore, through our networks worldwide with other Lafarge companies, we therefore started to talk about ways that we can innovate to come up with alternatives for asphalt roads in the country. And one of the innovations that I'm proud to really talk to you about is a concrete road technology. It's not the traditional concrete that we know about, which has been demonized by costs and high technology that is required to implement, but it is a roller compacted concrete technology. This is a dry concrete mix, which you can put on a road today, and in 4 days, vehicles are able to move on that road. Not only is it a very innovative technology, but it also saves a lot of costs. Today, because of the cost of bitumen, the cost of constructing this road in a local market is much cheaper because the materials are sourced locally. For example, cement, aggregates, and the equipment is also available locally. This therefore means that this road can last 20 years without maintenance, and yet you can construct it with materials and equipment that are locally sourced and locally available. The road also has a life of 50 years, which if you compare to concrete roads, this really for me is an innovation that we should really embrace and adopt. The second innovation that I want to discuss or that I want to share with you is on affordable housing. And for Lafarge, over the past 2 years, we've been trying to come up with a solution that would address the need that we have in the market. We know that we have a 1.2 million backlog in housing in the country. And therefore, our drive has been, how do we enter this segment? How do we participate and deliver something that is of value to the people of Zimbabwe? And what we are able to come up with is a solution around smart partnerships. So last year, we decided to partner with 5 key partners who are like-minded like us in delivering affordability. And this was a finance house, and specifically it was National Building Society, Lafarge as the project manager, and of course, supplier of material. We had a land developer who was able to service land and deliver it at very competitive rates. We had a contractor who was able to come up with low-cost designs and construction technology. And then we partnered with our pensioner who was able to fund this project upfront so that the beneficiaries do not have to pay a deposit in order to access these houses. And I'm happy to say that we were able to pilot this smart partnership innovation, and we constructed 85 houses for our own employees. You've been seeing the videos. These are just trying to show you what we did and the journey that we took in order to come up with these 85 houses. And this model has been copied and replicated several times in the country so far to date. People have been able to go on our site, They've been able to see the houses. They've been able to see how these houses are not only affordable, but they are also decent accommodation for people. And so in my parting words, I just want to challenge you and say, what is it that we can do with what we have? Instead of waiting for solutions to come from the East or from the West, as Zimbabweans, with the materials that we have, with the equipment and the human resources that we have, what is it that we can do to innovate and to come up with ways in which we can contribute and further the development in the infrastructure segment? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I thank Edith for such a clear demonstration of the work that you're doing, the innovation, the durability of your products that you take so much pride in. I was just thinking that for you to demonstrate how durable this road that you've, the concrete road that you just spoken about, I've got a perfect spot for you, and that is the CZI offices. If you can come and pave the CZI offices, I can assure you, you will get more customers. Ladies and gentlemen, we move to the next stage of our proceedings for today. We are going into a session where we are going to talk about growing manufacturing competitiveness, lessons from India. You saw yesterday the introductions by the Indian delegation, what the companies are doing, and to top that up, we are going to have a presentation that is going to be presented where we are going to be where they are going to speak about competitiveness and the lessons that we can learn from India. And to do the introduction of the speakers and our panelists who are here, and to chair the session, we are going to have a lady who needs not much introduction really. We are familiar with her. She is the managing director of First Mutual Life Assurance Company. She is also the chairperson of ZITF. She is also the chairperson of Mosewa Tunya, a company which is a subsidiary of the Ministry of Tourism. She is a board member of Net1, where she is responsible for business development. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a round of applause to Ms. Ruth Ncube, who is going to chair this session.
Good morning to you all. Growing manufacturing competitiveness. Lessons from India is our discussion, our first discussion this morning. I would like to introduce to you our presenter for this paper. Ranjan Pandekar is working as Lassens Tobra Regional Head for Southern African Region for the Power Transmission and Distribution Business and is based in Gaborone, Botswana. Ranjan holds a mechanical engineering degree from India Institute of Technology, Mumbai. He is a professional with over 25 years of experience in management, business development, marketing and sales across Africa, Middle East, Far East, Europe, and Americas. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Pandekar. Thank you. Please be seated, sir. I would like to introduce my panelists this morning. There's been a slight change, but as you know, Zimbabwe is endowed with talent. First of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Kumrai Katsande, sitting right behind me, former CZI president, currently a member of the National Council, chairman of Standing Committee of Agribusiness, and chairman of the National Competitiveness Commission Board. recently announced, I think, a fortnight ago, and he is the chairman of Nestle Zimbabwe. I would also like to introduce Godfrey Kanyenze, an executive director in the Labour Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe. And finally, Henry Ruzvidzo. Henry is the MD of Richmond Furnitures, current CZI Vice President, former MD of Adam Bid, and immediate past president of Mashonaland Chamber. Just to talk through this topic, this very interesting topic, growing manufacturing competitiveness, as an introduction. As we may all know, India is on the threshold of major reforms and is said to be poised to become the third largest economy of the world by 2030. The country is the third largest economy of the world on purchasing power parity basis and is also the second fastest growing economy with its growing rate second only to China. In 6 out of the last 9 years, the growth rate of India's economy exceeded 8%. India's ranking in the Global Competitiveness Index for 2016 to 2017, released by the World Economic Forum, improved 16 places to 39, making it the fastest riser up the ranks amongst 138 countries surveyed. The year 2014 was dubbed the year of change in India. The government of India launched the Make in India initiative to encourage national as well as multinational companies to manufacture their products in India. India emerged among initiation of the program in 2015 as the top destination globally for foreign direct investment, surpassing the United States of America as well as the people of the Republic of China. In 2015, India received US $63 billion in FDI. According to another competitive index, the Deloitte & Touche Limited and US Council on Competitiveness 2016 Global Manufacturing Competitive Index, under the Shifting Dynamics Among Global Manufacturing Nations section, out of the top 10 manufacturing competitive nations, 2 regions, North America and Asia Pacific, dominate the competitive landscape. All 3 North American countries are in the top 10 today and are expected to remain in the top 10 ranking 5 years from now. As many as 5 Asia Pacific nations, China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and India, are expected to feature in the top 10 by 2020, leaving only 2 spots remaining for Germany and the United Kingdom to represent Europe in the top 10. The report also indicates that 6 focus nations, United States of America, China, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and India, collectively account 60% of the world's manufacturing GDP, demonstrating the influence these nations have on global manufacturing trends. All this is very inspiring, and would like to hear from our speaker, listening carefully to what lessons can be learned from the India experience. What does Zimbabwe need in order to follow in these grand footsteps? May I now invite, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed speaker to come up and give us this presentation. I would like Mr. Pendeka to take it from me, and then we will then go into some overviews by our panelists. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, madam. I need to do a PowerPoint presentation. Could you please? Yeah. I need my spec. So this is the flow of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the Indian economy. Some of the things you heard from ma'am just a while ago. A slide on what are the business relations with Zimbabwe currently. How we are trying to grow the Indian manufacturing sector. It's a problem area for us to some extent. What the CII is doing, and some experiences with our own manufacturing sector within Larsen & Toubro, which is the company I work for. So here you see some inputs on the, I can't read that too well, sorry. Yeah. The GDP in India is about 2.2 trillion. But the key message here is that in terms of purchasing power parity, India is the third largest economy in the world already. We need to do better than that. We'll get there. Here you see a breakup of the GDP composition, how it has moved over the last 25 odd years. Services sector has grown in importance in the Indian economy tremendously in the last 20-25 years. We have a growing workforce, it's going to grow even further, as you can see in the projected figures. There is a growing middle class which is going to provide the impetus for the consumption, and that makes the Indian market interesting not only for the Indian business community as well as for the global business community as a whole. Inflation and interest rates are pretty much under control, as you see in the first graph. And the RBI repo rate is the rate at which the central bank, Reserve Bank of India, lends to the bank. This rate is 6.25, but a couple of days ago the RBI governor has announced a further reduction. It is now going to be 6%. So these parameters are pretty well managed in the Indian economy. Again, deficits, as you see there, both are under control over the last few years very well. International trade, USA remains the major trading partner. Jewelry exports are a key component in terms of the product mix. Foreign direct investment has been increasing in India, and USA, UK, Mauritius, these are the countries which are contributing to the greatest extent. Telecommunications, software, construction industry, these are the sectors where a lot of this FDI is flowing into. In terms of India-Zimbabwe relations, I think the trade is not, you don't see a hockey stick kind of graph here. I hope that these kind of interactions and led by CII will hopefully change the picture soon, and we will see a different picture in the years to come. India's manufacturing sector, some of the policy reforms which have taken place, which were implemented by the government, easing the regulatory environment. Starting a business in India is, or let's say was, a tremendous headache. So many permissions and permits were required that it used to put off a lot of people from, even attempting. So a strong attempt is being made to reduce the amount of permits necessary to sort of start a business. Online applications, we are trying to use the digital technology available as much as possible. Again, India was, until recently, a very difficult place in terms of the taxation structure. There were federal taxes, provincial taxes, local government taxes, and how each tax rate applies to which sector. It was a big problem. A lot of chartered accountants have done very well in that situation. But now we have eliminated all that. We just have a goods and services tax, as we call it, which is a VAT, practically. More and more sectors are being opened to foreign investment. In the old system, the political system immediately after independence was relying more on socialist principles. So foreign investment was looked at, with some degree of caution, and foreign investment was not allowed in many sectors at all. And where it was allowed also, it was controlled. Those things we are trying to change. Tax rates, particularly for micro, small and medium enterprises, we are trying to reduce from 30 to 25%. And political funding also, a lot of reforms are taking place so that it opens up and the corruption aspect reduces as much as possible. Here you see a picture where the growth which is coming in the GDP, as we saw in an earlier slide, services is the biggest contributor to the GDP. Manufacturing sector contributes in India about 15 to 16% of the GDP. In an economy like China, that percentage is closer to 30%. So there is a tremendous amount of scope to improve. We need to practically double the manufacturing contribution in India as well. And the Indian government has announced the Make in India campaign with a view to rejuvenating the manufacturing sector. The main initiatives in these are improving the ease of doing business, which I talked about a little while ago, facilitating investments, fostering innovation. This is, I think, a key. A lot of people have good ideas. We must make sure that there is a mechanism which allows those ideas to be implemented. We can't have people just thinking of things and not getting the wherewithal to make it happen. Enhancing skill development. This is also, we have a huge workforce as we saw earlier, but if they don't have the necessary skills, then it's practically going to be wasted. Protecting intellectual property. This is again something which is critical. If somebody is coming up with a product or service which has innovation, then we must make sure that the innovator is able to realize the benefit of it, at least for a reasonable period of time. And the other thing is we need to invest in best-in-class manufacturing facilities. We don't need a manufacturing setup which can cater only to a specific market. We need to set up facilities which can allow us to access the entire global market that is available. So these are the main pillars sort of the Make in India campaign. In the next slides we have some of the details. I will go through them pretty fast. You can have a look at them when the presentations are emailed or shared with you. Smart cities, developing world-class infrastructure. This is a major mission. The city of Bombay is well onto this path. City of Nagpur in central India has also announced the award of the tenders, and they are also going to be a smart city where the digital technology will be accessed even in public fora. Encouraging FDI, as you see on the image on the left-hand side of the slide, a lot of sectors, including defense sectors, have been opened up. In the past, these percentages used to be closer to 0. But over the years, they have been increased. In many of the sectors, it is even increased to 100%. Then, as I said, fostering innovation is a key element of the Make in India strategy. We have to make sure that all the ideas that people are coming up with get a chance to be implemented so that the best ones then work out and make a significant contribution to the competitiveness as well as to the GDP of the country. Skill development for the huge workforce that we have, unless they are skilled, is practically of no use. Large corporates like my own company, we have about 9 central skill training institutes which we run. But the SME sector, let's say, will need some kind of support from the government, which is now going to be provided under the Make in India campaign. And best-in-class manufacturing. We don't want to have manufacturing facilities which can provide products which are 5–10% better than what are available in India today. We would like to set up a manufacturing facility which provides products which we can sell into the global market and which will allow people to compete effectively in the global market. So this is also being incentivized by the government. CII, let's talk about it. The delegation which we have here from India is through the Confederation of Indian Industry. It's a developmental institution providing services to the business community. We have close on 8,500 members, and there is a network of 60+ offices in India and about 10 offices abroad. The jobs that the CII does are shown on this slide. One of the major things we do is policy advocacy. So the industry, within CII there are groups sector-wise which discuss with the various business entities who are members and come up with suggestions for the government to change the various rules, laws of doing business. And I think CII has been doing an excellent job at this over the years. Business development services, apart from the inbound or outbound, we have a lot of delegations visiting India where CII partners with the Chamber of Commerce in other countries to have delegations visiting India, plus we are also regularly visiting countries outside, like the one delegation of which I am a part today. This is the facts and figures on CII as of today. The indirect membership is currently huge because we have some direct members which are 8,500 odd. But there are other smaller institutions which are CII members, and through them the overall membership and the feedback that we can get is quite significant and pretty much representative of the business community in India today. In Africa, CII has been having an engagement for the last 25 odd years. Closely working with the government of India. Apart from business delegations like the one we are in, CII members and CII office bearers also accompany the government ministers who are visiting various countries. Then particularly in the case of the African continent, we have at CII a industrial services training program where people from various countries in Africa are visiting the training center in India, and training has been provided to them over the years through their Chamber of Commerce's, the local Chamber of Commerce. This is organized. And I think this program has contributed very well in improving the relations between our countries. Inbound and outbound business delegations, as I mentioned, practically there are more than 10 delegations visiting various parts of the world. You can see there listed the various delegations which have come to Zimbabwe also. I think we have had regular interaction every 1.5 years. There is a delegation coming to Zimbabwe. Let me talk a few slides about my own company, Larsen & Toubro. We have a revenue of about 16 billion, close to 50,000 plus employees, more than 100 subsidiary companies. And L&T in India is known as a company which builds things which are of national importance. The statue that you see there is currently under construction. It is a 182-meter tall statue which is going to be the biggest one in the world. And the contract for that was given by the government to Larsen & Toubro. I think within a couple of years, the statue will be open and available for visitors to see. Projects, services and products, out of which projects is the biggest contributor to our business. We are basically an engineering, procurement and construction company. We are also into services in the financial and technical technology areas. Products, also we manufacture electrical automation products. Plus we are also manufacturing special purpose machines which are required by the various projects that we do in the different sectors we are active in, like mining particularly. These are the business verticals that form part of the company Larsen & Toubro. Coming to one of the factories that we have is a transmission line tower factory which is in Pithampur, central India. It has a capacity of about 45,000 metric tons, and we have gone in for various certifications for this factory to develop the competitive advantage and recognition that is required in the market today. Practically all the certifications that are required of a factory at global level are available. So we have spent a lot of time and effort to get these done and have the systems in place to maintain the certification as well. This is the typical organization. There is a head who is supporting, who has the three main functions reporting to him, and the lower line is the support functions really. This is the flow chart of the manufacturing process. The word EDRC that you see there is Engineering Design and Research Center, which is the core of L&T really. Because we are an EPC company, we build things, but we have a huge number of engineers employed in the EDRC who are capable of producing the designs necessary and doing the engineering work necessary to complete the projects on time and with the quality level that is required. This is the process flow in the factory. You have fabrication process, galvanizing, because the transmission line towers are basically angle towers. It's a simple product. It's not a very high technology product. So we have fabrication, cutting, bending, galvanizing, and practically then it's over and ready to be shipped. These are a few concepts or systems that we have incorporated into the manufacturing process to improve the performance of our factory. Why we mentioned this? There are several others which can also be utilized, but these are some of the few ones where you don't really need big investments, and they do provide a significant benefit to the bottom line as well as the top line. The first one we talk about is the pull system. In the old days, we had, as you see on the screen now, the push system. There is a central PPC planning office which decides who will do what, with very little consideration for what is the rate at which the buyer is picking up the material. This typically leads to inventory buildup. It increases the cost, it reduces your efficiency, it hits your bottom line. We have changed that process, and we now have what we call a pull system. The previous system was a push system. Pull system means that depending on what the market or what the buyer is ready to pick up, this is mainly qualified or considered in terms of the orders that you have. On that basis, you start planning backward. If you see the arrows, they are moving backward, the information flows back, and just on that basis, you decide who will do what. This leads to huge reductions in inventory. This is basically a mindset thing. You need to train people in thinking differently. It doesn't need too much investment. This is something which you could implement in the factories that you have here quite easily. Similarly, the 5S concept, I think this is not a very new one, but this is an effective tool, again, to clean up the factory, make it look good, creates a good impression with visiting customers and inspecting agencies, and it reduces waste as well. Area management system, again, in order to improve the motivation levels, form area management teams who are assigned certain areas within the factory, who manage them and implement the 5S to reduce waste and improve efficiency. Single point lessons, you need to have training to people to start to behave differently and to think differently. In order to achieve this, you need to train them. But taking people out of their routine jobs is not something which is always feasible. You can't take them out of their jobs for a long while and send them off for training very regularly. But by adopting the single point lesson system, you can do that on a kind of daily basis and get excellent results, as you see in the photos there. Thank you very much. What I have tried to talk about is the fact that India's manufacturing sector is, well, I won't say it's a problem, but there is a huge scope for growth. So I have talked about some of the initiatives which the Indian government has taken, and they have decided to call it the Make in India initiative. Maybe some of these could make sense to you. You could use them. I can't prescribe them to you because you know your economy much better than I do. But these are pointers, I believe, in the right direction. Which ones you select, it depends on you. You have to choose. Similarly, at the factory level also, we have seen some of the initiatives that we have taken. Very little capital investment is required to implement the improvement initiatives that I talked about. There are several others which are also possible. What I can say is that if you need support on that, then the Confederation of Indian Industry can help you to decide which initiatives you need to take here in Zimbabwe to improve your manufacturing competitiveness. And some of the companies who are here in the delegation can help you to get the right kind of resources to implement what you choose as your sort of Make in Zimbabwe initiative, let's say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rajan, for that elaborate presentation on the journey from 2014, which was dubbed Year of Change in India, to the current successes that you've shared. I would like now to focus on my own panelists, and I'll start with Dr. Kanyezi. Zimbabwe is currently dealing head-on with the issues related to ease of doing business. From the discussions and lessons presented thus far from the Indian experience, how can Zimbabwe achieve this without distorting labor markets whilst remaining competitive. If you could just give us a synopsis on this from your perspective.
Thank you so very much. A very good morning to you all. Firstly, let me thank Mr. Pendaka for a very insightful presentation. I think what is very critical from the Indian experience, firstly, is the very fact that India, just like Zimbabwe, for a long time struggled with reforms. It was bureaucratic. India is a complex place. India is a democracy. Things have to be agreed and so forth. India also is a laggard in Asia. It's amongst the laggards, the countries that were way behind in terms of implementation of these structural changes. And also, the reform experience of India is fairly recent, as we have seen. So I think there are a lot of take-homes for Zimbabwe. To start with, he ended up by saying that you need to change the mindsets. You need to change the way people think and the way people look at things. I like the very fact that you highlighted the fact that India had so many phobias. Part of that phobia was fear of foreign participation, which is a big issue in Zimbabwe. Foreign capital is, we haven't really become comfortable with these issues of foreign participation, just like India underwent. One issue that you did not necessarily speak about that I got from my reading is how the change happened in India. India, before 2014 elections, was governed by a coalition for 12 years. And nothing was moving. There was a gridlock in terms of policies until Mr. Modi came onto the scene. And what is very interesting is that Mr. Modi was coming from a very successful state, Gujarati, where he had initiated reforms for 12 years. He had streamlined the administration. He had steamrolled infrastructure. He had also basically attracted investment, both domestic and foreign. So he was convicted. He had that conviction for reforms. So he was a champion of reforms. So when he got to power in India at the national level, he was coming on the mandate of reforming the national level. So he had that conviction that he had and the experience and expertise that he had garnered from running a very successful state. So in this regard, it's very, very critical for Zimbabwe, firstly, for us to have that conviction as Zimbabweans about reforms, the importance of reforms, and also educating each other about the costs and benefits so that all of us move as a team. We move together with labor, with business, and government to implement the reforms. That's why you see in India, it happened so quickly. 2014, reforms start in earnest. By 2015, 2016, India jumped 16 places to 39th place. So this is remarkable. It requires bold leadership, strong leadership matters. I think this is not just an experience from India. It is also a lesson from the East Asian tigers, where an individual could change the whole trajectory of a nation. We saw it with Singapore. We saw it with China, with Deng Xiaoping, when he ascended to the throne in China in 1978. A champion at the top does matter. So we need champions at all levels in terms of undertaking reforms. We need to deal with enablers. I think that came very clearly. One of the areas where where India moved significantly is in the area of infrastructure. I think we need to deal with the enablers. And India actually shows that it can be done. And they did it fairly quickly. You also highlighted fairly early in your presentation the issue of macroeconomic stability. You talked about, that the deficit is under control, inflation is under control, etc. This is very critical in the sense that it creates a predictable environment for doing business. In Zimbabwe, one of the challenges that we face is the lack of predictability about policies. We cannot think beyond the next week or beyond the next month or beyond the next year. So we need persistence in terms of implementing policies to create a conducive, predictable policy environment. And I think that comes out very strongly from your presentation, especially when you highlighted how the indicators in terms of macroeconomic indicators reflect a fairly stable environment and improving environment. So I think it's very critical for us even in Zimbabwe to basically create that predictability, that trust that is missing. When I was coming here at the airport, I really groaned inside as we were driving past Harare at 5 o'clock in the morning, seeing people on the queues waiting for banks to open at 5 o'clock in the morning with blankets. And you cannot be productive when your people are attracted by other things, trying to deal with survival issues. So these are critical issues that we need to deal with in Zimbabwe through a social contract. You're talking about labor issues. I think what is vital for us in Zimbabwe is to create this coherence for reforms, to create this momentum for reforms across all the sectors. Yesterday, someone was asking from labor why labor is not represented on some of the boards, etc. I think this is critical, even when you learn from the Asian experience, that with the development of trust, the government basically ensures that there is inclusiveness, policy inclusiveness. You bring everybody on board. I think this is a critical lesson, not necessarily from India alone, but from the Asian tigers. I think this is a very, very strong message where the concept of inclusive embeddedness has been highlighted, where the government is coherent within itself and extends that coherence beyond government to other key stakeholders. So the issue of partnerships across stakeholders, I think, is a key message that is coming. So, in conclusion, what I like most about the presentation about India is that even a country that had serious challenges, where there were gridlocks in terms of policy, where it seemed like nothing was moving, infrastructure had challenges, there were logistical challenges, etc. And all of a sudden, a reform-minded leader emerges, and things change, and they change rapidly. I think that is a very important thing that we need to take home, that Znoita, it can be done. India has done it. And then lastly, I want to quote from Aristotle. He says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an event but a habit. So we need really to change the mindsets and the way we do things, as has been highlighted in the case of India. And lastly, at the micro level of the enterprise, you did highlight some of the issues that can be addressed in terms of creating productive capabilities, changing the mindsets of the people at the shop floor level. You highlighted some of these issues, training them, skilling them, etc. Things that are critical, and I would want to applaud CZI for bringing the Indian and Turkish delegation. Because what is critical, especially where in Zimbabwe we have got serious challenges with the access to and the cost of capital, the issues of partnership with external partners become very critical. Equity capital becomes critical in terms of short-circuiting the learning curve. So I think really this is a wonderful experience in the sense that it emboldens us as Zimbabwean stakeholders that it can be done. If India did it lastly, we can do it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doc, for that insightful response. Talking to Mr. Katsandi, from a commerce and industry perspective, and from your own vast experience, how far do you think Zimbabwe has gone? And are we making headway? I would like you to probably comment on regulatory reforms, the anti-corruption focus, and most importantly, innovation regarding this subject of ease of doing business in Zimbabwe.
Thank you. You know, once you have the mic, you have the freedom to do what you want. This is the good thing about having the mic. So, Madam, before coming to answering your questions, just to congratulate Amal Tantawi. You know, I'm associated with Lafarge. So, Amal, good job. Thank you for supporting CZI this year. I think we need our business community to support entities like this so that they can make sensible inputs into policies with government. So thank you, Tatawi, and your team, Amal. And thank you, Minister, for leading the applause on that. Just a few comments, I think, to also congratulate the speaker on the Indian situation. A few months ago, I was looking for the governor of the Reserve Bank. You know, we are all queuing to try and talk to the governor about getting payments offshore. And I was told he was attending an African Development Bank meeting in India. I think they decided to have their strategic retreat in India to see exactly what is happening there and what lessons. So I think, President, you ought to be congratulated with your team for bringing the Indian delegation so we can see what to learn. But you know, we have all these delegations, and one of the challenges I would put to you, President, and your colleagues leading us at CZI, I'm not sure what is in the memorandum of understanding that you signed. And I would hope that it says something to the points which have been raised. I'm not saying if it doesn't, we should revise it. But I'm just pointing to this fact that I think we need to be practical and to build on these experiences. You know, people come, we share experiences, and then it finishes at that point. So I hope that we can pick up all these lessons and we can implement, I think at CZI and also within our companies. I mean, could the Indian Chamber, could they second somebody to come and help us improve our capacity at CZI on some of these things? So I think we need to think different so that we can benefit from some of the points raised. I would say on the whole question, bigger question of manufacturing, you're talking about the question of corruption, innovation. I think we need a sense of agency. We need to feel uncomfortable with where we are. And I don't get the sense that we are sufficiently uncomfortable on all those issues. We talk about them, but really when you come to what are we doing about those, I think we have some limitations. Most of our manufacturing is agribusiness orientated. If you look at the companies on the stock exchange, manufacturing, be it Schweppes, Delta, and so on, they are mainly agribusiness. And for them to perform, it means that agriculture must perform. One of the areas which are of concern to industrialists is the fact that we have tended to have policies which are silo generated. So the Ministry of Mines will come up with something and then they will run to the top of the mountain with that thing. And this ministry will also come up with something and they run away. And we don't have alignment in policies and initiatives. I'm not sure how government can do this, Minister, so that we have a lot more alignment in policies. Pre-implementation, at formulation, and then post-implementation, so that we have serious reviews to say what we said we were doing, is it having the effect? Somebody was saying to me, since 1980, we have had 19 economic development blueprints, you know, like Zimaset and so on. And the question I'm asking is, do we do enough reviews before we go into the next one? What are the lessons? What is positive? What do we pick up? What has been the impact on manufacturing? What has been the impact on agriculture? So I think we need to do a lot more. And I'm pleased we have universities represented here. I saw somebody from NAST, from Bindura, and from Africa University. I think they also need to pick up on those points so that they are getting input which can be useful to us. The point has been made about doing things that work rather than doing things that we want. Now, this is a big difference. I think we need to learn a lot more there, that our policies must be about what works rather than what we want. If I look at the question of FDIs in India, we were sharing with colleagues the other day that if you look at China, the United States is one of the key investors in China. I don't think you can say that China and the United States are political allies. And yet, they're doing business. I think we also need to learn from that experience. When we're doing business, let's do business. And we don't allow the politics necessarily to interfere with foreign direct investment. I don't think we choose our cell phones on the basis of which country they are coming from. I don't think so. So I think we need to take a global perspective on some of these issues, which will have an impact on manufacturing performance. The other question I would say is we also need to accept reality. What is reality? I visited a clinic, I won't say where, I won't give the identity in Harare, and they said they were open. So the doors were open, there was a receptionist, and I said, listen, I think I have a sore throat, can I see a nurse or a doctor? And she said, you know, whilst we are open, there is no nurse. So I said, how about a doctor? She said, well, there is no doctor. So I said, well, you are not open. And I think, you know, we are getting the same thing with our banks. You go to the bank and you're told there is no money, but the bank is open. Now, the bank should open to do business. And I worry about us accepting some of these things. The bank is open, but there is no money. I mean, the bank is not open. So I think this really worries me, that we begin to accept, I don't know whether to call it a new normal, but an abnormal, you know, situation. I think we need to deal with these things and with these realities and get people to close the bank. Then we will do something. But if we keep the bank open and there is no money, the banks are open. So, you know, I think we need to deal with these realities in our day-to-day lives. Then I think we will see things happening and moving forward. I was fortunate to visit Gujarat, but that was a long time during Dr. Kurian's Operation Flood, yes. And I was particularly impressed. I don't think, well, Mr. Modi was not yet on the scene. So India was really, as my colleague was saying, it was not really flying. But I think your coming here is an inspiration to us. As my colleague says, that if India did it, why can't we do the same? I think we have the potential, but we really need to do a lot more. Let me just say this. You know, when we get together in these meetings, all the things that we are talking about, manufacturing must perform, and we know that economies where manufacturing is sinking, it is a warning that this economy is sinking. This is clear, everybody knows this. But I think it's not always understood. You know, when people see the Ministry of Industry, they think, it's just another ministry. It is not like that. This is an important ministry because countries which have shown progress in the quality of life of their people, they have improved on manufacturing. There's no question about it. So we need really, I think, to recognize this. I visit schools, Minister, in the rural areas now. And what I see is 0% pass rate, 2% pass rate. But when we get the results, you know, when they come out, we talk about the top 100. This is not the reality. The reality is the bottom 5 or 600. There are some bright kids at that bottom 500, 600. These kids will drag us down. They will not allow us to just focus on the top 100. The point I'm trying to make is, what is our reality? And I think we need to, this is why we want to do these things, you know, improving manufacturing, Minister setting up your competitiveness commission. I think we should not lose this fact. Coming to these congresses, it's so that we improve the quality of life of our people. And I think too often we are not putting enough, you know, of a focus on that. Just what is the impact of corruption on the quality of life of our people? You know, we think it's just happening in that little corner. You know, diamonds disappear, but it was something private and so on. It really affects the quality of life of our people. And I think even as industrialists and business people, we should not lose sight of these facts. And this is why I think the point that the lady made earlier, Edith, talking about doing things for employees, you know, building houses. This is a responsibility which, as industrialists, as business leaders, we cannot run away from. We have that responsibility. These things have to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katsande. Quite an interesting observation there in those comments, very critical. Mr. Rosito, from an industrialist perspective and from your own company perspective, what are the real issues? What are the stumbling blocks? How fundamental is the issue of skills and human development from both a macro and micro level perspective? And lastly, the business, trade and exchange delegations that we've seen in the country, I think starting from the last 4 years, they've escalated in terms of coming in regularly. Have we really benefited from these delegations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listening to your comments there and listening to the presentation, a very good presentation, I think the word that kept ringing in my head was inertia. Everything that was said, we somehow are attempting to work on those issues. The ease of doing business, we have a rapid result program that the government and private sector have been working on for the past 1.5 years or so. Improvements at a company level that I think we heard about. CZI has had a program also for almost 1.5 years on lean manufacturing, which is encouraging companies to look at what they can do at a macro level. I think generally best practices in Zimbabwe are well known, but it's getting traction on those issues and getting things moving. I'm not sure how India has done it. Perhaps they have national consensus on the destination where they want to get to, how they've been able to, get things moving. I don't know whether our problem is we don't have that common vision of where our nation should be in 20 years' time, in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time. That is causing the inertia. We are fully aware of what needs to be done. India is talking about manufacturing in India. We've been talking about Buy Zimbabwe. Perhaps we need to change it to, manufacture Zimbabwe. But it's similar programs, but it's how we've been implementing these things. Interest rates, we all know where the interest rates ought to be. We've talked about it, but our interest rates are still 12%, at least, there's been a reduction, but it's still way too high. But how do we get from where we are to where we ought to be? Tax reforms, I think we all know about the multiplicity of regulatory agencies and the cost burden on business. We've been talking about it, but getting it sorted out seems to be the problem. The regulatory environment, the taxation structures, I think even the trade deficits, we talk about it, we know about it, we don't desire to have it, but we actually not getting the traction. I think there is a lot of inertia in the country. In terms of skills and human development, I think in Africa we are rated as one of the countries with the most educated population. Our sons and daughters are in every country in the world, gaining knowledge about how things work. But are we attracting them to come and settle here and do business here? I don't think we have skills problems. I certainly have not experienced problems recruiting the necessary staff into my business when it's necessary. We do have the skills, but are we an attractive destination for our own children? So in short, Madam Chair, I think there is inertia, and I think we all need to talk about how we can get traction on the issues that we know about.
You probably omitted one of the key questions on the trade exchanges to say, as a company, have you really benefited from the delegations?
Yeah, I think a lot of delegations have visited the country from China, from India, from Turkey. We have seen companies that have struck deals and they've actually got traction. My company specifically, we've not really looked internationally. We have done business regionally. But we have had delegations from the region, from Mauritius mainly, but we have really not taken advantage of that. But I know of companies that have struck deals, but I think we could be doing much more than we are doing.
Thank you very much to my panelists and to the presenter. We will now open the floor to further discussions. And I would like us now to have a conversation together regarding lessons learned from India, regarding how we together can move forward, looking at the Zimbabwe scenario. Mr. Dube.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Gottfried Dube, Standards Association of Zimbabwe, Head of Marketing and Business Development. The presenter, you are certified to various standards, and could you please share with us the benefits you have derived from certification, and also how widely is certification adopted or accepted by industry in India? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Walter Chigwada. I'm from Zimplow. My question to Mr. Pendauka is perhaps it's starting from the point that you mentioned that fostering innovation and protecting intellectual property rights is one of the key pillars of Make India or Make in India. One of our challenges here as manufacturers in Zimbabwe is patent and trademark violations, and we are spending a lot of money trying to fight off the copying of our products, particularly from companies that come from large economies that have made it, India included. And I was wondering whether there is a way that we can get cooperation, perhaps through CZI and your chamber, CII, to try and bring this to the fore, so that our own innovations this side and our patent rights our patent rights are also protected. Many companies are having now to have huge budgets, particularly the companies that are in the iron and steel products where I come from, those who have a regional presence. If manufacture in this country, we are having to fight off patent violations all over Africa, particularly from these economies. I thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. Sibela Njawangwe, CZI. I've got maybe two questions. The first one is relating to something that I didn't see, maybe you cover in your presentation, but what I've learned about India is that a lot of work has been done over the years to skill and incubate, and even the issue of reserve sectors was one of the areas, was one of the policies that was used to develop Indian manufacturing enterprises. And then over the years, you seem then to have opened up these sectors up to a stage where now you're you're reaching thresholds of 100%. How has this contributed to the growth trajectory that we are now seeing? And the second one relates to, maybe this is an area we'll probably pursue with CZI and CII, but what are your thoughts with regards to global value chains? In other words, if India is getting 63 billion worth of investment, it also means there is a significant requirement of inputs. Perhaps when we look at even just your own company with 16 billion worth of revenue, if Zimbabwean companies could be suppliers into your company, what it then means is the growth trajectory of Zimbabwe changes. Given that Zimbabwe has got a number of minerals that are currently being exported without beneficiation, here we are talking about even strategic minerals like tantalite. We are looking at because India has got a motor trade industry, what are the prospects of perhaps coming up with catalyst converter manufacturing enterprises that then feed into enterprises like your Tata? So we are saying with this partnership that we're generating, what are the opportunities with regards to global value chains in Zimbabwe coming in?
Thank you very much for those questions. I will allow Mr. Pendeka, please, to respond to the 4 questions.
The first question was, I think, with regard to the benefits of certification. The certificates that I showed in the slides, these are all certification to international standards, environmental standards, quality standards, health and safety standards. These are the certificates which open the doors today. Let me say, I've spent a fair bit of time in handling export business in India. Let's say in the early 90s, these were not so commonplace, but some companies who started looking at exports, they got exposed to this. Because companies outside India and the parastatals there were insisting upon this, particularly in the developed world. And a lot of the larger companies adopted them. And now, let's say 20, 25 years later, the situation is that it's common in India. Without these certifications, you can't do business. Yes. So the benefit is that without certification, you are not in the business today, actually. This is a sort of entry-level requirement, like something like having a license to manufacture. You need a license to manufacture, you need these ISO certifications to environmental, health, quality standards, without which you are nowhere today. Even within the Indian market, this is the picture today. At the global level, definitely these are mandatory. Then the question was with regard to IPP. This is a tricky issue. I mean, I'm talking from practical experience. You can have a legal framework and laws in a country which help you to protect yourself. But it's an uphill battle. And if you come across people who are copying, you just have to take whatever laws are available to you and fight the battle. There is no other way about it. Sometimes you lose. You know, people get away with copying sometimes. You have to live with that, unfortunately. This is a fact. This is my own personal experience. CII can definitely help you in putting you in touch with, let's say, lawyers or attorneys who can help with this. And they can put you in touch with people who can help you to improve the legal framework here also for protecting intellectual property rights. With regard to the global value chain which you said, if I've understood correctly, I mean, company like Larsen & Toubro can partner with businesses here so that whatever resources are naturally available, you can add value to them and then move them out of the country. Perhaps in my presentation it didn't come out, but one of the big things is to have a global viewpoint, setting up manufacturing facilities which have world-class standards. But actually the real point behind is that your mindset should be such that whatever investment you are doing today in the manufacturing sector or even in services sector, you have to have a global viewpoint. You can't set up a factory that somebody is making buckets of a certain quality. You can't set up a factory which makes buckets which are only 5% better. You have to make something which you can sell anywhere in the world. And this will also indirectly lead to improving your manufacturing efficiency, effectiveness. So partnerships are possible. I mean, we have to look at them on a case-to-case basis. I hope I answered your question in. Thank you.
Would like to take the last 3 questions if there are any questions still around the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Muzongondi from Kwekwe Polytechnic. I would want to get clarification from the speaker as to the relationship that does exist between institutions of higher learning and the manufacturing sector. If there have been any, how did India get along with it, and what are the results? Thank you.
My question, my name is Tracy Mutaviri. I'm from Dairy Board, Head of Marketing. My question relates to competitiveness insofar as convincing the consumer that your product is as good as what is coming from outside. We seem to have a perception generally in this country by some consumers that whatever is foreign must be better. Did you ever experience this kind of perceptual challenge in India, and if so, how did you get to persuade the customer where the products are of equal quality? Thank you.
Are there any questions for our panelists? It appears India is very popular this morning, but we did have input.
My name is Peter Mtasa from ZCTU. I understand India has got a huge informal sector in small to medium enterprises. What has been the role of this sector in this transformation, and what tools were used if it participated, if it was an important stakeholder in the transformation? What tools were used to revitalize this sector? And again, it is important to also appreciate each transformation has got its own costs. What were the social costs to this transformation, and how was it shared, the burden, how was the burden shared, and how is now the productivity gain also shared amongst all the various economic agents? Thank you.
My name is Joseph Gunda from the Matabeleland Chamber President. Was very interested with this issue of Make in India initiative. This seems to run with what the Honorable Minister mentioned yesterday in terms of our own local manufacturing and Buy Zimbabwe campaign. I just wanted to find out what initiatives India made. We do have statutory instruments that have been put in place that we believe perhaps can help us in this regard. But I just wanted to get more detail on how India managed to make this initiative work in terms of Make in India initiative.
We will allow Mr. Pandaka to respond to that last set of questions.
first question was with regard to higher learning institutions. This is the key. In fact, right after independence, the various federal as well as provincial governments have been investing in setting up learning institutions, which have been producing particularly engineering graduates, which are very important for the manufacturing sector. And these have been set up in collaboration with the top institutes in the developed world, so that we have access to the best learning practices and the latest knowledge as well. And these engineers are recruited typically by the top manufacturing companies. Some of them become entrepreneurs on their own. And I think these institutions have played a very important role in moving India up the graph, let's say. Then there was talk about, the perception in Zimbabwe that foreign is better. We were the same. When I was in school, in childhood, anything which came from abroad, an uncle visiting from abroad, whatever he brought was definitely great. No questions were asked. It was assumed that this is the best thing in the world, and whatever a similar thing which was available in a shop or wherever within India was, by default, it was considered as something below par. We have had to fight this, and there is no easy path to it. You have to be, let's say you are manufacturing a product and you want to compete in the global market. You have to go and find out what is selling there, what features it has. You have to be honest to yourself in accepting what are the deficiencies in your product. You have to improve them. You have to be on mark. You must convince yourself that you have a product which is at the global level. And then you have to go and make the pitch to the consumer. That's the only way. There is no easy way about it. And we have done this in India since, let's say, the early 90s. Let me also mention, I am a great Modi supporter. Please don't get me wrong here. But, and Modi is doing a great job. There is no two ways about it. But the fact is that the change which we saw in India has started somewhere around 1992. When the Congress government with Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister, at that time actually the changes started to happen. India started to liberalize. And what you see today is something which is a result of work done over the last 25 years. Okay, it's a fact that we started in the early 90s, a lot of enthusiasm, many changes happened, and then sort of we ran out of steam about 10, 12 years ago. And, the whole things, people were working in a listless kind of fashion. Mr. Modi has come and he has really enthused the entire nation to do better, to do more. He himself is setting an example. So, but it's a work of 25 years, so there is no easy way to go about these things. SME sector, this is a key. Companies like Larsen & Toubro, we have ancillary units which supply a lot of stuff for us, because as a company grows, typically your costs, your fixed costs tend to impact some of the manufacturing or services that you provide. They can't really absorb the higher overhead that you have. And that's where the SME has come in. The government has supported them with lower taxes. There are even things like payment protection. Let's say, for example, a company like Larsen & Toubro. We are dealing with a unit which is a small-scale enterprise. And we issue a check to them. Bouncing of checks is simply not allowed, but going beyond that, we can't even delay their payments. So the large corporates can't play around with these companies. These kind of protections are available, lower tax rates are available, in some cases even a tax holiday may be there in specific cases. That's how we supported the small and medium enterprises, and that's how they have grown. And I think they are very critical to the success of even larger corporates like the Tatas and the Birlas and even Larsen and Toubro. And the last question I think was with regard to Make in India. Actually the thing is, this is a 2-year-old scheme, let's say, and we are still not done with it. The fact is that only 15% of our GDP is coming from manufacturing. There is scope to take that from 15 to 29 as it is in the case of. So there is a scope to double it. In the slides that I have showed, the details of the various initiatives which are taken are there. I think we can share that slides with anyone who is interested. But it's a work in progress really. We have not done the job. We are not celebrating a success here. We are just, I was just trying to share the option or the path that we have chosen. It seems to be working, but the jury is still out on it. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Do we have any final question? Before, yes, there is a question there that we need to tackle.
Thank you. Shepherd Chawira from Shepherd.
And we did not really reform in the 18th.